Hello, everybody. Hello. This is a bit of a different video. This is something I've actually never done before. This is going to be a commentary track on Doctor Who Incarnations at War, my 50th anniversary special, or what was supposed to be my 50th anniversary special. Ended up taking 5 years to get out, but nevertheless, I just thought I'd do this video really because there's a few little tidbits that I'd want to go through about the creation of this and why it took so long. But we're starting off with part one, obviously. There was a little flashback then to Amy. This is supposed to be the Doctor. The 11th Doctor in this is supposed to be the 11th Doctor right after the events of Angels Take Manhattan. So he's alone, he's on his own, you know. And cracks in time show up from the 11th Doctor series, the end of the 11th Doctor series, which is sort of a precursor to this whole episode. But yeah, so this was all filmed back in. Part one was filmed over the summer of 2013, so 5 years ago now. I would have been 14 when I made this part. And it was filmed over the summer. And it was ready to be uploaded by about September, I think. But I held off, of course, because it was going to be this part was always intended to be released on the actual 50th anniversary. And so this is one of 3 title sequences that was created by Edward McCracken, who was Zygon Visuals on YouTube. I don't believe he does YouTube anymore, though. I don't think his channel is still going. But he very kindly made the title sequences for parts 1, 2 and 3, and then I did the title sequence for part 4, because it was never supposed to be 4 parts, you know. It was only ever supposed to be 3, but yeah, so I really started planning this whole episode when the 11 Doctors set came out way back in 2010, as I'm sure that everybody did. I'm sure, you know, there were loads of the 11 Doctors figure adventures when that set came out. But I knew that I didn't want to go in and do it straight away. I wanted to build up to this event by doing an 11th Doctor series and a 5th Doctor series of adventures as well. And so that's what I ended up doing in the end, and then I built my way up to this. Now, this is a very... This is one of the scenes that was affected by a series of rewrites which took place during the making of this. Is one of the reasons that part 3 and part 4 took so long to come out, is because there was never supposed to be a part 4, but after the rewrites there kind of had to be. But this is a scene on Gallifrey before the Time War, as the title card states. That is actually Blue Brick TARDIS voicing the Time Lord, and that is Havana 089 voicing Rassilon. These two come back in part 4, but they're both Rassilon is instead voiced by me, and the Time Lord doesn't say anything, which is a real shame. I did try to get the two of them back to do the lines, but I couldn't get in touch with them, which is a shame. But yeah, so that scene was originally supposed to be as they say, the Doctor's on his 8th incarnation, but 7 have been taken. And the original idea was that the 8th Doctor that had been taken would be the 8th Doctor from the Time War, and there would have been a bit of a sequence involving him in the Time War. But of course, you know, leading up to the 50th, it turned out that the 8th Doctor did not fight in the Time War, and so that was all changed. But that scene was kind of left in. But it was changed so that actually, because it turns out Rassilon, it's kind of sort of, if you look on the general consensus is that Rassilon was resurrected in the early days of the Time War, and so it wouldn't make sense for him to be kicking around before the Time War had begun. And so, you know, that in part 4 we find out that that conversation actually took place in the Matrix. Anyway, we've moved on quite a bit from that. There was a little flashback there to the 5th Doctor getting killed in recreation of the Daleks. The idea was that Omega took the 10th Doctor out of time and would have used him to save the 5th Doctor, essentially. Just give him a bit of... Omega would have used him to give the 5th Doctor a bit of regenerative energy, because the 5th Doctor could not die there, otherwise everything would have gone to pot, and the Doctor would have died in his 5th incarnation, and Omega's plan would have gone wrong. It's a bit convoluted, and I'm not necessarily happy with the way that some of the stuff has turned out here, but it's just because of these rewrites that I had to do. A lot of them were due to the 50th anniversary, really, and some others were due to just some other bits of research. There the Doctors are. Of course, the beauty of filming over the summer is that the weather is far better. A hideous issue later on for when I wanted to film outside again. So I shot this all on a very temperamental camera. The screen didn't work on the back of it, and so I had to look through the viewfinder the whole time. I didn't have a tripod that would support it, so I had to improvise. But there was a macro lens. The only lens that I had for this camera was a macro lens. That was the only lens that I had access to at the time. And so you have to be really... It's really temperamental. Sometimes you can get shots that look great, and other times it's blurry and horrible and a mess. Yeah. And also all of the lines were recorded on a really crappy mic that was plugged straight into my laptop. That was really awkward. So the lines sound horrible. That was one of the reasons that Part 3 was delayed so much. Is that I got a new camera, well, for the end of Part 3, but I also re-recorded all of the lines with a new Zoom mic, which is what I'm still using today. But that's the end of Part 1. Probably, I think it's the shortest of all the parts. Not much happens. That was always just intended to set up the events that would take place. So that was released on the 22nd of November by accident. It was supposed to be on the 23rd. I think something went wrong there. It says it was published on the 22nd, but whatever. Yeah. So like I said, there were a number of rewrites. I'll get to a bit later on. One of which being Omega and the Daleks as well. But Part 2 was filmed September, October time, I believe. there was actually a bit of an issue with Part 2. It was supposed to come out the week after Part 1, and it didn't end up coming out until Christmas Day of 2013, because I actually lost the whole file a short while before I was going to upload it, and it was an absolute pain in the arse, and so I had to totally re-edit the whole thing, which was really annoying. This is Part 2 now. Part 2, of course, takes place in the Dark World again. For the most part, it's in the Dark World. But yeah, so by the time that I'd got around to finishing the edit of this, it was Christmas Day. Going back to what I was saying earlier, actually, I began planning this in 2010, and this is totally not what the original idea was. I think the original idea was to have Morbius as the main villain, because I was always fascinated by Morbius. To be honest, if I had to choose my favourite Doctor Who villain, it would probably be Morbius. I love Morbius. This is another intro created by Edward McCracken as well, and the theme tune that was mixed by me is out of sync, and it's the most hideous thing ever, so I'm going to talk over it, but it was an issue with the rendering, and I couldn't fix it for the life of me, and it was dreadful. So let's not listen to that. Yeah, the original idea was supposed to be with Omega. Not Omega. Morbius. But then, not too long after I came up with that idea, Batman March came out with the 10 Doctors, and I didn't want it to seem like I was ripping that. And so, I switched him out for Omega once we got the Omega figure. And yeah, it was only ever supposed to be 3 parts. But like I said, it never ended up that way. The beauty of the Dark World is it was all shot indoors, so the weather wasn't a problem, which was brilliant.
I deny it! So naive.
Yeah, you can start to see what I mean about these shots. I mean, there's some of them are just terrible. I was always really frustrated with the way that parts 1 and 2 and 3, to be honest, looked like that there. Oh God. But Morbius does make a cameo. Here he is. There he goes. There's Morbius.
Sorry. There's nothing else I can do.
Yeah, all of this music that was used here is actually from the 2013 proms. That's kind of one of the ways that I tend to get around copyright, is by using either unreleased music or live music, and you'll hear a lot of it. And that's really because, like, I mean, YouTube's gotten a lot better now. There's actually a whole list of the rules about using songs, and I think most of Murray Gold's stuff is fine to use. It's just that you won't be able to monetize your video. Excuse me. But the way that it works is if you can buy it on iTunes, they'll be able to trace it, and it'll get flagged. So that's why I tend to use live or unreleased music. Of course, the idea of this Dark World is that it's supposed to play on all the Doctor's fears. Only for the Daleks to step in and go and kill them once this is all once Omega's completed his work of turning all of the TARDISes into paradox machines so that he's able to rewrite all of time.
Assemble your squadron
and
execute the doctors.
But the Daleks were never supposed to have a bigger part in this. The original idea was that in Part 3 the Doctor would go up to Omega's realm and destroy the key after they'd destroyed all the paradox machines, and that had basically sort of reset everything, and the Daleks would be eradicated from, they'd be sent back and trapped in this universe, and that would have sort of been the end of it. But at the end of that, it was kind of like, well, what the hell are the Daleks doing here? They're absolutely no threat. And so I decided to flip the tables, essentially, for that reveal at the end of episode 3. But for now we have the classic Daleks. This was all shot in October, and the weather was horrendous, which I didn't mind because it gave it that sort of gloomy feel that I wanted the Dark World to have. But it was torrential downpour. It was awful. It was a real pain to film. There goes the first victim of the Daleks. But like I was saying earlier, the 8th Doctor in this was originally supposed to be the 8th Doctor from the Time War. Scrapped that, and instead it was supposed to be sort of the 8th Doctor leading up to the Time War. I mean, of course, now after Night of the Doctor, he shows up in a totally different costume and whatever, so it doesn't really make sense. But the 8th Doctor being the last Doctor alive in this bit was supposed to sort of foreshadow that transformation into a warrior. But now it's just kind of like, from the Time Lord's perspective, that scene with the Time Lords probably took place when the 8th Doctor was going about with Charlie, and this is the 8th Doctor with Lucy. Yeah. And he's about to show up now. Here we are. So that is supposed to be John Hurt's War Doctor. And the idea was that because Omega... Well, the original idea was that Omega never took part in the Time War. But there's a common theory that he's the could have been king that was referenced in The End of Time. And so I decided that, Omega could have been in the Time War. But the idea was that, because he couldn't remember the Time War, he had no idea that the John Hurt Doctor existed, and the War Doctor is constantly trying to get through into this universe, but can't quite make it, and that's why he's not there at that time. But that was the War Doctor voiced by Edward McCracken. He was originally doing the voice of the War Doctor. Again, I tried to get in contact with him to do the voice of the War Doctor in Part 4, but I couldn't. It's really unfortunate, to be honest. This was sort of 2013 was sort of a high point for WhoTubers, if you want to use the term. But yeah, it's quite unfortunate because a lot of people stopped doing YouTube, and it was quite sad, really, after the 50th anniversary. It was a bit of an empty place, the Doctor Who universe. But yeah, I couldn't get Edward to come back and do the lines for the War Doctor again. And that War Doctor action figure, the War Doctor action figure, of course, didn't exist at the time of this being filmed. Like I said, this was October 2013, and by that point we knew the War Doctor was the Doctor that fought in the Time War, but we didn't have the action figure, and so I improvised by sticking a 9th Doctor jacket over a Derek Jacobi Master figure, or Professor Yana. I knew I wanted to fit that piano cue in somewhere as well, so I was determined. So I stuck it in there.
What happened? What?
But now, of course, it's revealed that the doctors, whatever, actually, it was all a lie. And as the 11th Doctor states, the Dark World had a sped-up time cycle. So time was actually moving much quicker in there. It felt like a couple of hours when it was actually 20 years, I think he says. 20 years. For Omega to turn all the TARDISes into paradox machines.
Yes, I hear that too. It's the cloister bell. No, that's impossible. No, can't be. What the hell's happened? No, not again.
And it can't be. It's impossible.
The paradox machines. All of them, all of our TARDISes are paradox machines. That's what made all of this possible, the cracks in time.
Yeah, so these
Made that possible.
cracks in time
Well, that's impossible.
first showed up in the 11th Doctor series, and they actually show up in the Zygon Project, which is part of the 5th Doctor series of adventures I did.
And whoever they are, they've had...
And
What do you mean?
they're
The dark
basically a lead to Omega's universe.
making it seem like a few
Um,
hours when it was really a few decades. We've been in there for 20 years. That's impossible. But there's another thing as well, something you're all missing. Where are your companions, eh? Tegan, Ian, Barbara, Jamie, Rose! How could I forget? Perry! What happened? Why couldn't we remember that must have been a perception filter, making you focus on anything that wasn't there? Whoever this is wants us on our own. Very
Yeah, there's the
well
explanation
done,
as to why the
Doctors.
companions
I
aren't
can
there.
see that you didn't
I didn't want companions in this at all. That's why I sort of put the 11th Doctor at that point, when he is quite vulnerable, he's alone. And the 10th Doctor in this is also from
Where are they?
just after Planet of the Dead. So that's where he's at. So he's also alone. I didn't want companions in this because it just gets so crowded and confusing. And also, you know, we don't have all of the companions as action figures either. You know, and I'm no good at customs at all. So, I mean, I've always had this idea for a first Doctor figure adventure, and I did have an idea for a second Doctor one, but I think it didn't really pan out very well. But I just never got around to doing them because there's no action figures of the companions. There's finally the reveal of Omega. The Three Doctors version of Omega as well, because of course we don't have the Arc of Infinity one as an action figure. Yeah, John Hurt is credited there. Sort of a little hint at that being the John Hurt Doctor. But in between, so when I started making this figure adventure, I was just about to go into my GCSEs, and that's another reason that this took so long, is because I've been so busy. I mean, you know, in the time that it took to make this figure adventure, I've gone from the start of my GCSEs to halfway through my first year of university. I mean, at the time of recording, I've just finished my first year. So I will hopefully get cracking on some other projects over the summer. But that's another reason that this took so long. to make, just because I was just so busy. I did sort of take a break from YouTube, really. But this is the only part that has a previously, because part 3 wasn't uploaded until 2016, which was 3 years after part 2. So that's why I put a previously on this one. I didn't on part 4, which I mean, God, part 4 was almost 2 whole years later. Oh dear. This took such a long time. But this is one of the episodes which was massively affected by the rewrite. And part 3 was supposed to be the final part. Like I said earlier, the idea was that the Doctor would go up to Omega's unit, part 3 would play out as it did, and then it would carry on. What you see at the start of part 4, the first like 10 minutes of part 4 would have played out the exact same. But the Doctor would have destroyed the key, and that would have been it, and the Daleks would have gone. But you know, it wasn't. It was just. I mean, the Daleks are absolutely no threat then, so why do that? They're just in there for the sake of being there. That's what I hate. But yeah. And this was the final intro that Edwin McCracken did. I really like this one. I think it's real nice. This logo though wasn't supposed to be. There was a problem with the file and it got corrupted or something, and so I only had half the title sequence. I only had there was part of it missing. I mean, this was done by him, but I had to do the logo. The logo was done by me. Yeah, another reason that I decided to do part 4 was because of the runtime. After the rewrites, I mean, part 4 goes on massively as it is. It's what, 40 minutes long, nearly 40 minutes. And if you add part 3 onto there, it's, you know, like 50 minutes long. It's ridiculous.
What's the plan? How are we going to get out?
But you'll notice a massive change in the quality of the audio, and that's because this is the first episode that I used the Zoom mic on. And also, this was the first and only time I used my first and only time that I used my a Fuji camera, a Fuji digital camera, which was much easier to use than the previous camera, but it was still a bit awkward. And you'll notice another massive change in quality at the end of this episode. But yeah, weather also set this back because I had to do a lot of outdoor scenes again. And the weather in England is just crap all the time. So this took quite a while to get around to doing this.
Quickly, all of you, get back! Is this what it has come to, Doctors? Am I to have you killed now? No, Omega, stop it! This has gone too far. If you're so powerful, then why can't I see you in person, eh? Come on. Talk to me face to face. Confront me now. Stop all this hiding!
This is the first time Doctor goes up to meet Omega. Yeah, I knew I wanted a confrontation scene between the 10th Doctor and Omega. And the 11th Doctor would go up and do one as well, and that would be the final confrontation scene. We knew that.
Hello? Come on then, where are
Yeah, this is why I got rid of the Fuji camera. Look at that shot on his face. The light's just... That's just
What's this?
really awkward.
Some sort of space-time energy system. Very well done, Doctor. You are a fool to enter this place.
So yeah, like I said, the original cut of this scene was the Omega...
There was always a backup plan. A way I could return here. Because you realise just how bad it was.
The original idea was Omega
Now you're up to your same old stuff again.
hadn't taken part in the Time War. But after a bit of research, the popular theory that he is the could have been king, I decided to include him, but I rewrote it, but it didn't fit. You know, it wouldn't make sense for Omega to work with the Daleks. It just wouldn't make sense.
The Daleks, they fought against us. They led to the destruction of our planet.
Gallifrey is gone? No, you lie. I was there, I watched it happen.
But yeah, this is when Omega finds out about the Time War. And it's essentially what drives him a bit mad. Really, this is what sort of tips him over the edge. That he is working with the Daleks who destroyed his whole planet. He destroyed everything that he had helped build. And the Daleks just sort... And the idea was that the Daleks implanted the idea of...
You caused the destruction of our planet, and it was because of the Daleks.
The Daleks implanted the idea of...
You're working with.
This idea of him trapping the Doctors. And this vague plot that he had about wanting to go to Gallifrey and take over and become the new president. It was, of course, never the... It, of course, turns out to not be the actual plan, and it turns out that the Daleks are, in fact, behind it all.
Dalek fleet now at 100% efficiency. Supreme
These Dalek voices are a bit off as well. That's another thing that I wasn't happy with. And yeah, the Fuji camera was really blurry. It was only I think it was about 60 quid the camera. No, I don't think it was even that. It was like 50 or 40 quid. I got it for. It's a good cheap camera, but it's really difficult for stop motion.
I've been thinking. Perhaps there is a way we can
Change of heart. Go on then. What were you planning?
we kill her.
And there, of course, is the back is the DMAC gun from the Invasion of Time. Oh, I love. And yeah, I wanted to stick that in there. I wanted the Fourth Doctor to still have the DMAC gun.
I do understand, aren't you?
And here, this is what I'm talking about. There is a massive change in the picture quality. Another reason that I put off this for so long was getting new equipment. I knew that if I was going to go ahead with this new rewritten version, this new 4-parter, which had this whole stuff with the Daleks at the end, that I would have to get a new camera and a new audio recorder, because I just can't go on with how I was with the equipment that I had.
When Dalek Khan went back into the Time War, what if he didn't just save Davros? What if the Daleks had a bigger plan? Who's really in control? Omega? Or the Daleks?
There we are. And so, yeah, part of the rewrite, I knew that I couldn't just leave it as the exact same, but Omega didn't remember the Time War, because it wouldn't make sense for the Daleks to want to work with him. And he had to have gotten out of there somehow, and he had, it had to be some reason that he couldn't remember the Time War. And so, as it turns out, the Daleks wiped his mind so that they could use him to trap the Doctor, because they knew that he could do it. Yeah, they knew he was capable of it. Whilst the Daleks went off and went and conquered the universe, and Omega was stuck in his own antimatter universe. The Doctors. But yeah, part three is a bit of a short one as well, because I mean, it was like I said, you know, this was supposed to be the final part, but I knew it was going to take. By the time that I got to that point, I knew it would take ages to get the rest of the episode done, and so I thought, you know, I can either. That would have meant that it would have been almost just over 4 years between parts 2 and parts 3. And I thought, you know, that's a bit of a good place for a cliffhanger, really. And I can upload this as part 3 and then do a part 4, or I can keep going with this just being part 3. And I knew that it would be long. I never thought it would be almost 40 minutes, but I knew it'd be long. And so I decided to just go with that and upload that as a part 3 and do part 4. Which is really annoying, actually, because I think by that point I just uploaded a video, a teaser trailer for part 3, saying that it was the final part. I was like, oh no, I lied. But I still think this was the best thing to do, really, was make it 4 parts. I did this little teaser clip here. I was originally supposed to upload that as another teaser for the final part, but I thought, I've done so many of the damn things. And then this is the only time that I did an intro sequence. This is using the light at the end theme. There's a different theme tune for every intro sequence, which annoys me, but I just had some fascination. I thought, you know, well, each title sequence is different, so we can have a different theme tune for each one as well. But yeah. That ending to part 3 and all of part 4 was shot on a new camera, which was a Sony A7, which is a really nice camera. And it's what I plan to use from now until, I don't know if I ever need a new camera. I mean, it's a cracking bit of kit, it really is. It's really good.
Omega is of no more use to our plan. You want to join us now?
Another bit of unreleased music here. This is actually from the last of the Time Lords, when they're destroying the Paradox Machine. I love this music.
We must join the fleet.
What are you doing? Just trust me, okay? Trust me, it'll work.
And of course, how fitting that the music from when they're destroying the Paradox Machine in the last of the Time Lords, they're destroying the Paradox Machines in this. Yeah. I think this was all filmed about 2016, 2017.
All we have to do is use that on all the other TARDISes. You two take that, use it on all.
Oh no, I think this was 2016.
Even if we destroy them all, we can't get out.
But actually, there's a little moment when they come out of the TARDIS at the end of episode 3, and you know, it's sort of this barren wasteland, and you know, the Doctor says, it's Omega. This is Omega. It's sort of a reflection of Omega losing his mind. Was just an excuse for the fact that another reason that this was so set back is I moved house. And so I was filming it in a new garden. And I did it in the front because the front garden was just like, when we got here, it was just like, I mean, it's all been redone now, it's a driveway now. So thank God I got all of this done before we had the driveway done. But yeah, I had to write around me moving house.
Once I've done that, you all get out immediately. Don't think about me. Just get out and stop the Daleks. You can't.
Another reason that I think it was so set back was just my organisation was just terrible. Like I said, I did so many rewrites. And it just, all of the different, there was no like complete script. The bits were all in different places. I wrote scenes, and it was just a bit of a mess, really.
Now you have to go. You have to get out of here and stop the Daleks. You have to destroy them. This is exactly like you said. The Daleks brought Omega here. I have to make him understand.
But yeah, so I think they're all of the rewrites that took place.
You're what the universe needs.
So, going from, you know, Omega and the Daleks teaming up and Omega never taking part in the Time War. It went from that to Daleks saving Omega at the end of the Time War and wiping his mind. It turns out actually to be Dalek Khan that did it. Because I thought it'd be quite nice to link it back. I mean, it gets very convoluted, but I thought it'd be quite nice to link it back to the Stolen Earth and Journey's End.
Setting coordinates.
As another Dalek scheme.
November 1963. And what are we going to do when we get there? We can't fight an entire Dalek fleet on our own. He's right. Wait, I've got an idea. Change the coordinates. Set them for.
And the whole day is saved by a plot element introduced in Boomtown. I really like Boomtown, actually. I think it's I love Boomtown. It's one of my favourite episodes of Series 1. It's not even like a good Doctor Who episode, but it's just so enjoyable, and it's hilarious as well. It's the best cheap episode of Doctor Who. I mean, in the new series where they always have that one cheap episode, they always say they have the cheap episode. It's usually in episode 11 because all the rest of the budget has gone to the finale. Yeah, I love Boomtown. I think it's great. And here we are with our final confrontation scene, and that is actually the 12th Doctor's electronic TARDIS. Just because I love the light up windows and door sign.
I ought to thank you, really.
I just thought it'd be far nicer looking than just the standard 11th Doctor TARDIS with black windows and what have you.
And you granted me an extra regeneration when I was shot by the Cybermen. Also, I could get here.
Yeah, there's a line there about Omega granting him an extra regeneration when he was shot by the Cybermen. That's a reference to the 11th Doctor series. That episode is actually...
It's over.
It was only just uploaded
Never be over.
just before this part was released, because it got taken down for copyright years ago.
You will die here for what you did to our people.
But basically, in that episode, the Doctor is shot by Cyberman, and he uses up part of a regeneration, but the idea is that the TARDIS absorbs the rest. And it was never actually supposed to tie into this, but you know, after the time of the Doctor, we found out that that half regeneration that the 10th Doctor did actually counted. And so it was supposed to be another one of those half regenerations, not proper regenerations, but I needed to come up with an excuse, and you know, the excuse for the Doctors, the 5th Doctor and the 11th Doctor surviving is that Omega saved them so that they could get to him at that point, because otherwise, the 11th Doctor would have died there, and the 5th Doctor would have died back on the Dalek ship, and that would have ruined his whole plan. So he did everything that he could to save the Doctors, to ensure that they could get to him at the right point, so that his whole plan could work.
And what about you? Were you manipulated into thinking like a Dalek?
I don't actually believe this scene was scripted. I think a lot of it was improvised.
All genocide, all that bloodshed. Don't try and act like the better man.
I don't know, I just...
What it was like. We were pushed to do things we never thought we would have to do. The stuff I saw, the terror, I know what I did. And maybe, just maybe, one day...
And the music here is actually from Harry Potter as well.
Listen.
I didn't stick to Murray Gold music. I like to stick to music that, is appropriate. So I like to stick to, if I'm doing a 10th Doctor episode, I like to stick to music from the 10th Doctor's era. But I thought for this, I just, I mean, the Emperor's theme shows up in part 1.
Omega, give me the key. Never!
Now, there were 2 versions of this, though. There was this one, where Omega refuses to give up the key, and there was one where the Doctor does his explanation. He begs Omega to let him go and say, "Don't do it for me, just do it for the Time Lords, do it for our people." And Omega willingly breaks the key. And I'm still, to this day, conflicted about which scene I'd prefer. I mean, I put that one in because it didn't feel right to me that Omega would so willingly just give up. Like, he's gone pretty much mad through what he's learned in this part. And it just didn't quite feel right that Omega would willingly go, yeah, alright, go on then. It just didn't, to me, it didn't feel like it'd work for him. Then of course they have their bit of a scrap. I think that scrap was actually supposed to be a lot longer, I think. But I cut it down. I was like, it just felt a bit sort of overlong. And then, of course, the War Doctor comes in to save him. That was something that I absolutely knew I wanted. The War Doctor finally breaks through into Omega's universe and scares him. It scares him because he knows what this Doctor has done. He knows what this Doctor is capable of.
Get out of here now.
And it terrifies him. It's almost like this image of terror in his mind. I mean, even the Doctor's repressed this incarnation.
No! No! It can't be! You can't! No!
And he would have, the War Doctor would have slipped back into his TARDIS about there and got out just in time. Of course, he didn't die. But this is sort of, this is the 11th Doctor before the Day of the Doctor. This is the War Doctor before the Day of the Doctor. This is, and the 10th Doctor is before the Day of the Doctor. This is all set well before the Day of the Doctor. So there's a bit of, there's still tension. And this is, again, this is one of the reasons that this episode took so long. It's just all of these, I had to shoot all of these scenes in the TARDISes, and there's so much, and I had to do all this, animation, actually there was some really good Doctor Who CG animators out there, especially Manservant Pablo, who's done the infamous green screen TARDISes that everybody used to use. Because I mean, I'm not particularly good in creating my own CG. But there's so many. I mean, you know, there are so many great animators. And this is when the Dalek voices got fixed as well. I edited them a bit in Audacity.
We've got incoming torpedoes.
To make them a bit more, give them a bit more gravitas. And here's Davros as well. Now this scene was a very late addition. Well, I say very late. After sort of, you know, after we found out that Davros actually survived the events of the Stolen Earth and Journey's End somehow, which is never explained. But I decided that I'd put Davros into this episode and give him a little clip here, and like he's the mastermind. But I didn't want to give him too much to do. I knew he'd be somewhere else. I knew he'd be, you know, on Skaru or something.
Tired of waiting for the Doctor's death. I fear that my own may come first.
Yeah, it was just really nice to have Davros in there. It was something that I was quite happy to do. But at the same time, I was very conscious to not let this get too bogged down in cameos and current characters and woo. Yeah, but the Daleks took a long time to do as well, because this is the first time that I'd done Dalek dome lights lighting up. And I just couldn't, for the life of me, get them to like flash. And so that it just sort of stays steadily lit, which I'm not too... I mean, I'd love to get them to look like they're flashing, but I mean, in the new series, the Daleks, the dome lights don't sort of go on and off; they sort of pulsate, which is quite difficult to do. And there's also a lot of lighting editing going on. I wanted this to look at its best. I wanted this episode to look better than all the others, especially because it's just the sheer scale of this was something that I'd never done before, and I wanted it to look good. Otherwise it would come off as cheap and naff, and I still think it comes off cheap and naff in some places, but ultimately, I'm quite happy with how it turned out in the end.
Alert, an 11th TARDIS has been detected heading towards command ship. Impact in 10.
This was one of my favourite scenes to do as well. I loved doing it. This scene, I mean, it took ages to do, but I loved doing this. I always wanted this scene. I loved doing this scene. And this music you're about to hear is actually from a live performance of a suite of music from film Gladiator, which pops up at the end as well. And that TARDIS is, I kind of wanted to explain sort of why the TARDIS looks so beaten up in The Snowmen, which is the episode that takes place after this. And I mean, of course, there's the events of The Angels Take Manhattan, but if you ask me, it looks a bit tattier. And so I decided to, you know, have sort of a strain put on the TARDIS from getting out of Omega's universe just in time. I really messed it up. That TARDIS is an old 11th Doctor's flight control TARDIS that I had. which I've repeatedly set on fire, and covered in sort of dry brushed it with white paint and black paint, really make it look beaten up.
Or rather, something which you influenced Omega to create. Ah, yeah, I know why. I know what you did. You brought him back, didn't you?
This plan was devised long ago. Dalek Khan not only saved Davros, but Omega as well. He ensured our ultimate victory.
We'll see whether Daleks confirm
He still provided us with what we
Doctor's
needed. A Time Lord that was able
beliefs.
to trap the Doctor. We implanted this concept into his mind.
Altering his
And in the finale of the 11th Doctor series that I did, there's a Universal War. For any of you who haven't seen it,
when they find out you've returned,
the whole series
they'll
is
destroy you,
now
you'll destroy each
back
other.
available on YouTube.
Incorrect.
But that was all done between 2011 and 2012. So it's, it doesn't hold up, but there's a Universal War between the Daleks at the end of it.
The war between the two of you, the universal war.
And I knew I wanted to wrap that up as well, because it was kind of like always sort of... I think a few people have done something about a Universal War between the Paradigm Daleks and the 2000s, the Rusty Davies era Daleks. And I knew I wanted to wrap that up because, of course, you see those Daleks together. Even the Doctor Who experience, the original Doctor Who experience from the Matt Smith one, had a war going on between the Daleks. But I knew I wanted to wrap that up because you see the two factions together in Asylum of the Daleks. And whilst this is set after Asylum of the Daleks, I want to sort of wrap up that Universal War. This was also something which took a while to do. I wanted to make the TARDIS dematerializations look more effective, and so this was that I basically had an image. I took an image with the TARDIS there and without the TARDIS there, and the image without the TARDIS there, the image with the TARDIS in it would overlay the image without the TARDIS, and I'd gradually sort of fade it in and out, and in post. And then I also added a light layer and this sort of beam of light onto the image without the TARDIS, so it looks like it's. I tried to replicate the new series dematerializations as best as I could, really.
Alert, the Doctors are taking hostile action.
But this music here is actually from Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways. I love Murray Gold's Series 1 music. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I knew I wanted to include it.
It is time, my brethren. The victory of the Daleks is now.
The Dalek shielding is too strong. The TARDIS can't stabilize. We need to increase the power.
So I really, there's actually a lot of Series 1 music in this episode. I really loved.
The engines are starting to phase. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. If we keep going.
No, these clips were all actually done on video. I videoed these clips and sort of. I didn't move the camera about. I did that in post to make it look better, so that it didn't look too bad. But I don't really like using video in stop motion. I always feel like I'm cheating a bit, but just trying to do the light flashing with stop motion just so difficult. It was just far easier to do it. Just video it. And this is also, and this bit here where the 11th Doctor's TARDIS pretty much blows up is also a bit of a precursor for why he has a different console room in the Snowman. Because the idea is that, you know, his previous console room was destroyed doing this, blowing up the Daleks. It's the Rift energy from Boomtown. And yeah, so here's the Rassilon and the Time Lord are back again. I knew I had to include this clip because I needed to round that up, because otherwise it was just very confusing and didn't really fit. It didn't work.
Have been eradicated, and the Doctor's existence is ensured. And soon they shall all return to their own time and places. Question is, why did you feel the need to contact me through the Matrix about this?
There is a
Why are you
Rassilon's
so
confirmation that this whole conversation is in fact taking place in the Matrix.
Open your mind, brother.
And so the idea at the end of this is that the Time Lord came to Rassilon, and this is because this is sort of the start of
You have seen a prediction of what is to come.
this is the start of the Time Lords getting wary about the Time
phrase
War.
future hangs in the balance. An endless
You know, they're kind of
an inferno invisible to the lesser races,
planning
but
on bringing
devastating
Rassilon
to
back
the
if
higher
anything
form.
does happen, but this is the first Time Lord to go to contact Rassilon through in the Matrix. You know,
You believe that the
and the idea is that he wants to alert Rassilon about these events because it's imperative that they have the Doctor to fight, because they know that the Doctor is going to be able to play a key part in the Time War.
to become a reality, then you need a leader, Brother Time Lord. One who shall lead you to victory.
There's a bit of foreshadowing for Rassilon taking over as the president in the Time War. Now this scene, there was a bit of an issue with this. It looks a bit off on. It was basically shot too dark. It was far too dark, and like if you look at it on a laptop, if you looked at it on a laptop, it was fine. But if you looked at it on like a mobile phone, it was far too dark and you couldn't see anything. And so I had to brighten it up a bit, and it looks off now on a laptop. It looks a bit off, but I mean, it was worse before.
The whole thing
Pained me to have to do it, but
looks like I'm stuck here for a few hours whilst it sorts itself out. You took your time getting here, don't you think, young man? I almost didn't make it, actually.
so this is this is the final bit that was filmed
Well,
merely
lucky escape was all.
couple of weeks before the episode went out.
Well, it's nice to know that I've not just experienced my own death. Yes, always reassuring.
And then this was all edited together, and all the lines were done and
Say so myself. Yes,
such.
aside from the damage we did
And
to I'm sure
then that was
blame it on
whacked
another
on, and the episode was ready to go, and it went up.
atmospheric disturbance. Could result in some freak weather changes.
I think it was around the end of
Isn't that all
January
ordinary
this
for
year.
Wales, then? You sound like a native. We have to go. We've stirred up quite a bit of residual temporal energy with all of us being here. Might attract some unwanted visitors. Not to mention, I don't fancy cleaning all the mess up. And I think
But aside from the
this-
brightness issue, I was
Yes, into our TARDIS
fairly
is
happy with how
off
this
with you. And we will forget everything.
scene turned out. I loved doing the Doctor's goodbye scene, and
Experienced computers was
frankly, it was so much. After having to edit all of these Daleks and the
machines being destroyed.
flashing dome lights, it was so much
None
easier
of it ever happened.
to do.
The Universal War, Omega's universe, the cracks leading there. Does that mean I technically never died on the Dalek ship? I suppose so.
Yeah, so this bit
That
here,
means neither did I when I was attacked by the Cybermen. Yeah, I'm sorry, but what exactly are you talking about? All events for your future, nothing to worry about. Who knows?
this
Maybe
bit
you know
was
that
where they're talking about how they destroyed the paradox machines. It leaves a bit of, you know, because they destroyed the paradox machines and the key, technically Omega's universe never existed, and the whole, all of the events never existed, really, it never really happened. And so, because everything that Omega had intervened in was left with a bit of, sort of, I think Stephen Moffat calls it wiggle room, where time's in a bit of a state of flux, really. Nothing's quite, you know, the Fifth Doctor technically didn't die because Omega saved him, and the 11th Doctor technically never regenerated because, you know, Omega was the one to intervene with that. And so there's a bit of wiggle room. It's a bit of sort of a grey area, really, the 5th and 11th Doctor's deaths, and that ultimately really was done so that, you know, that is still the 5th Doctor and that is still the 11th Doctor. You know, it's not like the 11th Doctor version 2. It's still the same incarnation. It's just a bit of, you know, a bit of a grey area there. And the 10th Doctor even drops a line about, you know, maybe Omega's fate was changed, which is kind of a little hint as to, if Omega comes back to Doctor Who in the future, and it turns out he wasn't in the Time War, you know, these events are a bit of a, you know, these events kind of are changed that. These events are a bit of a grey area and in flux. So it's pretty much a result of these events. This scene was also really nice to do. I knew I wanted a foreshadow to the Time War, the 8th Doctor, and a conversation about it between the 8th Doctor and the new Doctors.
You're going to have to make a choice. The most difficult choice you'll ever make.
I didn't want them to outright tell him, you know, well, there's a Time War coming, and I knew I didn't want that, and so,
whether to fight, or whether...
Of course, this choice that they're talking about is actually,
something's coming, is it?
the choice to, you know, whether he becomes a warrior and takes part in the war, or dies after crashing in as his ship. Is sort of a little foreshadowing to the Night of the Doctor. And so the 8th Doctor heads off. He goes. Again, that TARDIS dematerialisation was done in the same way. Although I think I accidentally put the light filter over the top of the image with the TARDIS there, and so it looks a bit off.
I should be off too. We might be causing a bit of a scene. Good luck to you both. And you. See you again someday.
Actually, I did have an idea, which was only a fleeting thought. You know, I didn't. Originally, I did consider the 12th Doctor showing up to help destroy the Daleks, but I just thought, you know, I just kind of knew it was a bit, you know, you've already got Davros being thrown in there, and then the new paradigm Daleks being thrown in there, and then the War Doctor being thrown in there, and the 12th Doctor was just too much. You know, you've got references to Dalek Khan and yeah, just having the 12th Doctor in there was just... Because he would literally have just sort of shown up and gone, right, okay, let's... And then helped out and then took off again. Then, of course, put in the snow. Can't have, you know... Got to have another Doctor Who joke about the snow.
Can't remember the last time I saw snow fall naturally on Earth. So what about you? Travelling with anyone? No. Still on our
But like I said, this is supposed to be the 10th Doctor. Just after
And they were brilliant.
Just after Planet of the Dead. And so that's the current sort of situation he's in.
Like you said.
And I knew I wanted to have this little goodbye scene just between these two Doctors. Because they're both in a bit of a similar spot, they're both in a quite vulnerable spot. I just thought it'd be quite nice to have a little scene between the two of them.
Well then, Doctor, it's been a pleasure. The pleasure was all mine, Doctor.
That little sound there of their hands clapping together was actually just me going. Yeah. And I even bought a brand new... Because up until this point I was using my old 10th Doctor TARDIS playset. I even bought a brand new one for that final scene. I bought a brand new one because the one that I was using I'd had since like 2006. And it was, you know, it was very old and very worn out. And thought, you know, start of a new era now. This is... Because, I mean, this whole episode is just sort of a
Where the hell
closing the book on what I have done so far for Figure Adventures. It's kind of a final chapter, really.
You're supposed to be the warrior. You're supposed to be the one who fights in the endless bloody war. I've fought long enough.
And I, again, wanted this scene into
My fight today.
between the 11th and War Doctors. Just to show that,
This was our
really give a bit more tension between them, because like I said, this is before the events of the Day of the Doctor, so this is before he comes to accept himself.
I don't know what it is that I do.
And so this is the War Doctor leading up to him destroying Gallifrey, but he doesn't know that that's what he does yet.
What I do is not.
And like I said, I did try getting in contact with Edward McCracken to come back and do the voice of the War Doctor, but I couldn't, unfortunately, so this is me voicing the War Doctor. Isn't that final goodbye scene?
No. There had to be another way.
And that is the end of Incarnations at War. So, like I said, this was supposed to be... This is sort of the end of a chapter, really. This sort of ties up everything that I've worked to so far. After this, I do have more Figure Adventures planned. But I'm not going to be doing any more series, any more interlinks, any more... I don't believe I'll be doing any more multi-Doctor stories. I think this is sort of... You know, this was such a big thing to do. This was the biggest... The scale of this was bigger than anything I've ever done before. But, yeah, I'm just going to... I think I'm just going to... From now... I'm just sort of sticking to standalone episodes. And also I'm wanting to do Figure Adventures with Doctors I haven't done Figure Adventures with before. But that is all I have to say really on this episode. On this 4-parter. Blimey, an hour and 14 minutes. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this commentary, if you managed to sit all the way through it. And yes, thank you for watching / listening to me go on. I hope you were interested by some of the things you've found out about the making of this 50th anniversary / 51st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th anniversary special. So thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you as always in the next video.